Hello, this is Gavin Craig, Interim Music Director at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Brenham, Texas. I'd like to talk to you this day about some of the implications for liturgical music as St. Peter's prepares to reopen its services to the public in what's known as the second phase of reopening of St. Peter's. There are various implications for how things are going to look, and I want to discuss what liturgical music is going to look like when we're able to gather together in person. I want to begin by sharing with you some of the importance that liturgical music holds. It doesn't exist to entertain you. It doesn't exist to elicit an emotional reaction from you. Its purpose is to be an act of worship to God, something that through its beauty reflects the goodness of the Creator. And music has an integral role to human religion of any sort. I like to say that in Western Christianity, our tradition of having spoken prayer, if you pray, you're speaking, you're saying something, that tradition is actually very foreign to religious experience in general. And that as we have, for example, the Quran is in Islam is meant to be sung. In Judaism, typically the prayers are sung, and in the East, in the Eastern Christian religion, those prayers are all sung, but only in our tradition is that the case, that we would speak a prayer to God. And indeed, we have the Psalms, for instance, came from of course it is a part of Scripture, and in them we can learn great things about God and His redemption of the world through Christ, but also it was meant simply as what we might think of as a hymnal. Many of you know that, and we continue to use it in that way. In our own, and in fact, I'll go farther and say that for me as an instrumentalist, it's a humbling thing to realize that sung music is that singing is the most quintessential form of worship in our Christian tradition. Not the organ, not the guitar, not the piano, not the band or the drum, but singing. Individual people singing to God. And in fact, in our own tradition, in our Protestant and Anglican tradition, we've developed a rich heritage of congregational singing. One of the greatest contributions, indeed, to Western culture is our tradition of congregational singing. And it's something that I have a particular love of. I will tell you with all honesty, my number one favorite thing as an organist is to lead congregational singing, to lead people in singing praise to God. And but at the same time, we are facing something which has radically disrupted our patterns. The coronavirus pandemic is a very serious situation. It's led, as you know, to the deaths now of hundreds of thousands of people across the world. People of all ages, people of pre-existing conditions and non-pre-existing conditions. There have been deaths across the demographic spectrum, and it's our duty to keep everyone safe through good individual discipline. Wearing your mask, keeping 6 feet distance, things like that, as well as corporate and institutional practices which help minimize the spread of the disease. The Diocese of Texas has instituted various policies for churches, as well as encouraging churches to implement additional policies. Today, as we go forward, I'd like to share some of the diocesan policies impacting music. The Diocese of Texas has required that when parishes open up, I'm sorry to say that congregational music is not going to happen in public liturgies in the Diocese of Texas during phase 2 of reopening of parishes. This is a very serious instruction by the diocese, and it's one that I will say, for all my pre-existing opinions and preferences, that I think is the right thing. And I'd like to share with you why I endorse this opinion and how I came to this opinion. I did a great deal of research in forming a good opinion to offer to the leadership of St. Peter's, which was also shared with the diocese. And I found I didn't just look at the newspapers or articles or something. I didn't look at Scientific American. I looked at recent studies, reading things written by scientists who did the research on how the virus spreads and what it means for singing. So it is what I will be sharing with you. How does the virus spread? We'll also talk about what this means for singing. And I'd like to talk about what this will actually look like in practice, or rather what it could look like at St. Peter's as we go forward. So how does the virus spread? One of the interesting things I found out, you would think, if you went to school and took science and all that, you would think that we know about viruses. I learned about RNA, I learned about washing your hands and not touching your face. I learned the difference between a virus and a bacteria, and it's, we know all this stuff, right? Actually, the field of virology, obviously the study of viruses, is very much an uncertain science. It's something that does not have clear conclusions to it. So, but there are things we do know. There are things we have learned, both about this virus and about the spread of viruses, and I'd like to share those things with you as I've found them. The number one way that we know this virus spreads, the most potent way that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, the number one way we know that it spreads is through what's known as respiratory droplets. What is a respiratory droplet? It's when you speak. You ever see someone who speaks and they spit when they speak, and you just, it's disgusting? Well, it turns out we're all doing that. When you speak, when you cough, when you sneeze, obviously, there are droplets that come out of mucus, of water, of various internal fluids, and these are of varying sizes. There are ones you can see, there are ones you can't see, and they even come out when you do normal, restful breathing. So, and then of course, what happens is, if you spray water, you've sprayed water, it falls down, but then you've seen it mist. And imagine, the heavier droplets, yes, they fall, but the mist, it floats, doesn't it? And imagine ones that you can't see, and they hover in the air. They can hover for up to 30 minutes. And then you walk through it, and you breathe it in, or it comes into contact with mucus structures like the eyes. And then the virus enters your body through your respiratory or other membrane structures, through coming into your body through breathing. Now, these like I said, the size impacts the physical properties. So medical researchers like to distinguish between what we would call droplets and aerosols, respiratory aerosols. There are droplets that are released that are microscopic. I mean, there's no way you can see them. These are known as aerosols. They say, if I remember correctly, I think they can get as small as 5 micrometers. So these aerosols rather, are just collections of smaller droplets, and these can hover in the air for up to 3 hours. they can go through a ventilation system and spread from one room of a building to the entire building. They are small enough to go through most masks, except for an N95. They are, and in fact, they are all of them larger than the novel coronavirus. And of course, as you talk about droplets and the whole range, as I said, what happens is the virus is carried in these into the respiratory tract. So you can see kind of how this happens, and if you're disgusted right now, I agree. We've all been spitting in each other's mouths, and all of this is getting spread, no matter what's going on. As I've said to people before, if you're standing on the other side of the room, there are things which are coming out of your body. If you're both masked, there are things coming out of your body which will go into the body of someone in the same room. Now, we speak also in medical circles about what's known as a viral load. And this is very much common sense, that if you have one virus go into your body, imagine one novel coronavirus going into your body, and maybe it already has. Your body is warm, it's 98 degrees, we know what heat does to the virus, it dies. Or it lands in an area, and maybe it lands in your nose, and then you sneeze or blow your nose, and it goes out of your body and never impacts you. But imagine that 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, I don't know the actual numbers, but obviously more of them, your body's natural defenses are going to cave to the virus. So when they talk about public health policy, typically what you want is to reduce the viral load that people are encountering. Now, droplet and aerosol spread, as you can imagine, a large droplet is going to create a larger viral load. More droplets are going to create a larger viral load. Aerosols, tiny aerosol particles, very small viral load. Logical, right? So what we're aiming for is to prevent the spread of these droplets. So if you'll give me a second, I have a teleprompter which just went black and needs to be refreshed. Sorry for the delay. So, continuing. We're halfway through, so hopefully that won't happen again, and if it does, I can remember my notes. So, where was I? The droplets, and I know you're all shouting at your screens right now. So the droplets have more of a viral load, and more droplets are generated by more people. This is why they're recommending that businesses operate at 25% or 50% or 75% capacity to reduce the viral load being spread throughout an area and coming into contact with people. Larger groups of people create a larger viral load. Now, one of the interesting things about research is that there have been studies, I will say in all candor, there are studies that have shown that aerosols can transmit the novel coronavirus. We know that studies have shown that. There have also been studies that have shown the opposite. There have been objections to the first study. So, like I said, the field of virology is an emerging field, and we don't know whether aerosols, small particles, which can spread farther, will spread the virus. So the general consensus is if we can prevent the spread of droplets, then we can help prevent the spread of the virus. It is nearly impossible to prevent the spread of aerosols, but we don't know that aerosols will spread the virus or that they're even particularly harmful of a way to spread the virus. So what does this mean for singing? Well, piece it together. Singing produces droplets. Singing is an activity which is known to produce greater amounts of aerosols. One of the things that produces a droplet or an aerosol particle is when you sing, when you do any sort of respiratory behavior that is out of the ordinary, that is different from normal, relaxed breathing. That's what produces the virus. And singing is one of those activities, if you do it right, isn't it? And it's energetic, it's prolonged, so it represents a particular threat for the spread of this disease. So it also creates a risk of a higher viral load because of the amount of droplets spread. In my opinion, it also requires an increased distance. The diocese has updated for singers that singers must be at least 15 feet apart. You've been told 6 feet, and that's good. 6 feet is a reasonable distance for normal breathing, but singing is going to require for people to be 15 feet apart. You can imagine this is not practical for a congregational activity. The other thing is that in order for singing to be remotely reasonable and worthwhile of an activity to do, you cannot be wearing a mask. Masks, they make it difficult to breathe. It increases the amount of carbon dioxide in your blood. Maybe you're getting woozy if you go shopping with a mask on, and by all means keep it on, but that is because you're recirculating carbon dioxide back into your blood. The CDC does not recommend that you leave a mask on for more than 2 hours, for instance. And with singing, it involves particularly deep breathing, another risk of inhaling droplets. And so as we have this, and it blocks off the sound, and it restricts the jaw, and so it's necessary to have a mask off if you're going to sing. And you can see how this is simply not practical for a congregation. We can't have people taking their masks off 4 times a service. We can't have people standing up, breathing deeply into a mask. In order for public health, it's something that we simply have to restrict at this point. We have to do it as sparingly as possible and by as few people as possible. Again, both out of the health reasons, but also out of the obvious practical reasons. So it seems that choral singing is less of a threat. It is impacted. Don't get me wrong on that. We have to find new ways for a choir to function at St. Peter's. But it is less of a problem if we have a small choir. Small. One of the downsides to my work at St. Peter, you could say, in this case, it's a downside. Otherwise, it's a good thing, is I've increased the size of the choir. Now we can't have a big choir in the chancel, so we're going to have few people. To give you an idea, we're going to try to keep it under 5 people and have them spread throughout the chancel so that they have good distance from each other and they're not going to be spreading disease. So what will this look like? This is for phase 2. And we're going to have only the choir sing, and we're going to figure out how this works, because we don't know right now. We need to keep our choristers safe. We need to keep everyone safe, but we need to keep the choir safe. So there are things like rehearsal is not going to be possible. We're going to have to find spaces to warm up that are large, probably the parish hall, and to make sure that we are spread out while even doing that, and minimize our amount of time doing it. So it presents a real difficulty in and and we'll have enhanced distance, there's going to be less singing. Singing is still, as I said, an integral part of Christian worship, and we should not abandon it. But we do have to reduce it, and that's a compromise we have to make, is the choir is probably going to sing the psalm and probably going to sing at communion, and that could be it for singing, but at least we're doing something. Again, this is all things that we have to work out, and I am asking, and Father Stephen is asking, for you to have patience with us. We are figuring this out, and we need time and we need patience to adapt to things that are out of the ordinary for us. One of the other things that we're looking at, because this is so important, I am advocating that when it appears to be safer, we need to make sure that we are bringing back congregational singing. And I hope that you'll all join me in the congregational singing, that God wants to hear all your voices, not just those of you who sing well, but all of you. He created your voice. You should use it to praise him. So we're going to make sure this is a temporary and transitional feature of our worship. We also want to make sure that we are keeping at St. Peter's our number one priority, those of you who are not joining us in person, that we do not lose sight of you. I've just been in conversations today with people about enhancing our live streams over time. Again, this is a up to 1 or 2 year process. So we've got time to really work on best practices. And we want to make sure that people are able to stay involved with the church, whether they are feeling like they want to come or whether they're going to be safe and stay home. And I will say it plainly, if you are over 65, do not come to St. Peter's in person for worship. If you have a respiratory or pulmonary condition, do not come to St. Peter's for worship. If you have cardiac issues or diabetes, join us online. We are trying to keep you safe by offering full inclusion into our church through our online media. So make sure that you are staying involved in whatever way makes you feel safe and keeps you healthy. So we're still figuring out exactly how we can make this work. There are ideas that Father Stephen and I are floating. I don't want to, spill any beans. I will say one of the things that I am pretty committed to is once the church is reopened, the building with the mold work in there, I'm intending to make recordings of hymns, because I know that a lot of people have said how much they enjoy singing along with the hymns at home, and I'm thinking I'm going to release, 3 to 5 of them and put them online, and you'll get to hear St. Peter's organ. You'll get to familiarize yourself with the great hymns of our tradition, both the ones you know and the ones you don't know, but you're going to enjoy, I assure you. And you're going to be able to live out your faith through hymns, even from a distance. I'm looking at, I believe it's the 100th anniversary of the installation of our Pilcher organ. And that's something that calls for great festivity, but we can't gather together at this time. So what I'm looking at is having a digital centennial recital and broadcasting it via YouTube. And there will be other opportunities to make sure that you're staying involved with music, because again, it is an integral part of our religion. So you've seen what this return could look like. Again, I don't consider this to be anything other than an utter disaster to have to do something like this, but I do think it's the right thing. I do think we will save lives by doing this. I really believe that. And you've seen what this can look like, and you've seen why we have to do that. We can't have a spread of droplets throughout the nave. And there will be other practices, which Father Stephen will speak to, and possibly Deacon Carol, to explain how we're going to keep you safe, because that's our number one priority as we look at opening up. Other than that, that gives you an idea of how we will be going forward. And I wish I could say I hope you enjoyed this video, but frankly, I hope you didn't enjoy it. I hope that music making as a congregation means as much to you as it means to me, and that this, again, I hope you didn't enjoy hearing what I had to say, because it is a legitimately grievous thing to have to do. But again, it's for our own safety. We ask for your patience as we figure out the best way to keep everyone safe. And thank you for watching. Thank you in advance for your patience. And I encourage you to stay connected to St. Peter's digitally and to watch further for more updates. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.